My name is Elaine Parker, and I am 63 years old. I never imagined that a single afternoon would strip away every illusion I had about love, loyalty, and family. That day I carried a chocolate cake into the parking lot of my son's law office. Daniel had always loved that cake since he was a boy, and I wanted to surprise him, to remind him that no matter how grown up and successful he had become, he was still my child. His silver sedan sat tucked into a corner spot. An idea came over me that made me smile like a mischievous girl. I would slip into the back seat and wait for him. When he opened the door, I would pop up with the cake and laughter, and we would share a small, tender moment. The car was unlocked. Quietly, I eased into the back, crouching low, my heart beating with excitement. Minutes ticked by. Then I heard the sound of shoes on pavement. The driver door opened. Daniel slid into his seat, but another door opened as well. A woman entered. I did not need to look at her face. Her voice was enough. It was Victoria, his wife. At first my heart warmed. How sweet, I thought. They are leaving together. But my smile faded at the sound of Victoria's first words. "Are you sure no one will suspect anything when it happens?" she asked. Her tone was cold, without a trace of the charm she wore in public. Daniel answered, steady and confident. "We have gone over it 100 times. The plan is perfect. Mom will have a very believable accident. Slipping down those old stairs is something everyone will accept." The air drained from my lungs. I pressed my hand against my mouth to keep from gasping. They went on, calculating money, describing how they would act brokenhearted at my funeral, and even mentioning my brother Harold and his wife Patricia as partners in the scheme. By the time they closed the doors and walked away, the mother who had entered the car with playful joy no longer existed. Something inside me had died. I stepped out trembling, knowing life as I had known it was gone forever. Before I can tell you how I faced that discovery, I need to take you back through the life that brought me to that moment. My name may be Elaine Parker now, but for most of my life I was known only as Daniel's mother. Robert, my husband, died in a construction accident when Daniel was just 9 years old. In one single morning I became a widow, a single mother, and the sole provider for a boy who still needed help with his homework. We had no savings, no insurance, only a small weathered house on the edge of Portland. I was 29 then. To keep food on the table, I began cleaning offices downtown at dawn and scrubbing kitchens and bathrooms in private homes by afternoon. By evening, my hands cracked from bleach and my back ached so badly I could barely stand, but I refused to complain. Every dollar mattered, and every dollar had one purpose: Daniel's future. When Daniel turned 15, he needed a computer for his school projects. All his classmates had one, but the price equaled nearly 3 months of my wages. I looked at my wedding ring, the only piece of jewelry Robert had ever given me, and I knew what I had to do. I sold it quietly and placed the computer on Daniel's desk with a smile, never telling him the sacrifice behind it. I wanted him to feel proud, not guilty. Teachers praised him constantly. "Elaine," they would say, "your boy is brilliant. He must go to college." Their words became my mission. Each early morning, each late night, each pot of strong coffee was fueled by the dream of Daniel graduating with a law degree. Other mothers spent weekends shopping for themselves. I spent mine cooking tamales and pies to sell at church fairs, saving every coin in an envelope labeled Daniel's tuition. I wore the same pair of shoes for 6 years. I mended my dresses instead of buying new ones. My neighbors thought I was frugal, but in my heart I was simply determined. Sacrifice became the language of my love. I believed that if I gave Daniel everything, he would carry that love with him forever. At the time, I never once considered the possibility that love might not be returned. Daniel entered college on the strength of scholarships and my endless overtime shifts. I still remember walking across the campus on his first day, carrying a small box of his things. My chest swelled with pride as if every blister on my hands had bloomed into a flower that morning. It was during his junior year that he met Victoria. She was striking, confident, and came from a wealthy family that owned several businesses in the city. At first, I told myself to be happy for him. Every mother dreams that her child will find love. Yet from the first dinner at my modest house, I felt her gaze sweep across the worn furniture and chipped plates with thinly veiled disapproval. She smiled politely, but her eyes whispered another story. Daniel seemed captivated by her world of restaurants, designer clothes, and vacations that I could barely pronounce. Slowly, I began to notice subtle changes in him. He stopped talking about the teachers who had inspired him or the classmates he studied with. Instead, he spoke of expensive plans, of connections her father could provide, of parties where everyone drove cars that cost more than my home. After graduation, Daniel married Victoria in a lavish ceremony that emptied the last of my savings. I told myself it was worth it to see him happy, even as I quietly worried about the path he was walking. At the reception, I heard whispers, guests noting the contrast between the groom's glamorous new family and his humble mother sitting alone at the edge of the ballroom. I kept my head high, pretending their words did not sting. Visits became fewer after the wedding. When they did come, the conversations revolved around their new apartment, their future home, and the expensive places they dined. My stories about neighbors or old friends seemed to bore them. It was in those years that I realized the distance was no longer about miles across the city. It was about values, pride, and the kind of life Daniel now believed he deserved. I felt him slipping away, and no matter how tightly I held to the memory of the boy I raised, the man before me was becoming someone I hardly recognized. The day in the car had already cracked my heart, but the longer I listened, the more unbearable the truth became. Daniel and Victoria spoke in measured tones, as if rehearsed. They had memorized every step of my so-called accident. They described how I would fall down the stairs, how neighbors would shake their heads sadly, and how the insurance money would cover everything. Then Daniel asked a question that made my skin crawl. Are Harold and Patricia ready to do their part? Victoria's answer came quickly. Of course, your uncle has been restless since losing his job, and Patricia keeps saying your mother has always been stingy. She believes it is time the family gets what it deserves. That word stingy cut deeper than a knife. I had lived frugally not for myself but for Daniel's dreams. Every coupon clipped, every winter coat patched, every meal stretched with rice or beans had been for him. Yet to them, my sacrifice looked like greed. They continued to calculate aloud, speaking of numbers as if they were reading a grocery list. 200,000 for the house, 100,000 from life insurance, savings in the bank, at least 50,000. With that, Victoria said with a spark of excitement, we can finally move into the new subdivision and pay off the debts. I crouched lower in the back seat, my body trembling, my breath shallow. For years I had worked until my knuckles split, selling home-baked goods on weekends, taking extra cleaning jobs while my friends slept, and here was my only son treating my death as if it were a down payment on a better life. The conversation lasted minutes but felt like hours. They spoke of how they would behave at my funeral, how they would look heartbroken in front of neighbors, how quickly the house could be sold. When the doors finally closed and their footsteps faded, I remained still, afraid to move. I no longer recognized my own child, nor the family I thought I could trust. Alone in that parking lot, I realized I was caught in a conspiracy woven not by strangers, but by the very people who shared my blood. I drove home that afternoon with tears clouding my vision, but by the time I reached my driveway, grief had hardened into resolve. If they could plan my death so carefully, then I had to be just as careful in planning my survival. The first rule I set for myself was silence. I could not let Daniel or Victoria suspect that I knew. If I confronted them without proof, they might change their plan or worse, rush it forward. So I smiled during phone calls, accepted their invitations, and pretended to be the same trusting mother I had always been. Behind that mask, I began to watch. I noticed how Daniel's tailored suits no longer fit with the modest salary of a young lawyer. I overheard Victoria on the phone whispering about unpaid credit cards. One evening when they visited, Daniel left his briefcase open. Papers inside revealed late notices from the bank. Slowly the puzzle took shape. Their lifestyle $1,000 handbags, weekends at luxury resorts, dinners that cost more than my monthly grocery budget was held up by a tower of debt. They owed more than $50,000 to banks and lenders. Each day the interest mounted, and with it, their desperation. My own brother Harold was no better. Through a cousin I learned he had lost his job months earlier and had been dodging mortgage payments. Rather than ask me for help, he and Patricia had joined this scheme. They saw my small house and modest savings as their ticket out of struggle. Realizing this truth was bitter. My love had turned into their calculation, yet I knew panic would not save me. I had to think like them, plan like them, and wait for the right moment. As I sat at my kitchen table that night, staring at the photographs of Daniel as a boy, I whispered to myself, if they believe I am weak, they are mistaken. I will not be easy to kill. Carrying the weight of such a secret alone nearly crushed me. For 3 nights I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every cruel word I had overheard. I needed someone I could trust, someone outside the tangled web of my family. Only one name came to mind. Marjorie Hill had lived next door to me for more than 20 years. At 70, she carried herself with the calm strength of a woman who had worked 4 decades as a nurse. She had held my hand when Robert died, watched Daniel grow up, and shared countless cups of coffee across our kitchen tables. If anyone could believe me, it would be her. One morning, with my heart hammering, I knocked on her door. The moment she saw my face, pale and drawn, she pulled me inside. "Elaine, what on earth is wrong?" she asked. I told her everything, every detail from the car, every cruel calculation, every whisper of the plan. At first she shook her head in disbelief, but as I went on, her nurse's instinct shifted from shock to outrage. "My God," she said, gripping my hands tightly, "this is monstrous." Marjorie listened without interrupting, her eyes fixed on mine. Finally, she spoke with quiet conviction. "If they want to take your life, then we will take away their certainty. You are not going to face this alone." That was the moment the impossible idea took root. I told her what I had been turning over in my mind, to fake my death, to let them think their plan had succeeded, while I gathered proof strong enough to destroy their lies. She was silent for a long time, weighing risks the way only a nurse could. Then she nodded. "It will be dangerous, but better than waiting for them to strike first. If you are willing, I will help." Relief washed over me like sunlight after days of storm. For the first time since the nightmare began, I no longer felt like a doomed woman. I felt like a survivor preparing for battle. Once the decision was made, there was no turning back. Marjorie and I spent long evenings at her kitchen table sketching every detail. Her years as a nurse became our greatest advantage. She knew which medications could lower my pulse to nearly invisible levels, which symptoms would convince young paramedics of a sudden heart attack, and how to stage a scene that appeared tragically ordinary. We chose a Sunday afternoon. Daniel and Victoria always visited her parents then, giving us a window of time with no risk of surprise. That morning I woke earlier than usual, moving through my house with the strange awareness that I might never see it the same way again. I chose a yellow dress, brushed my hair, and even put on a little lipstick. If I was to die, even temporarily, I wanted to look like myself, dignified and whole. At 2 o'clock, Marjorie arrived carrying a small medical bag. Her voice was steady, though her eyes betrayed worry. "Are you sure, Elaine?" she asked. "Completely sure," I answered, though my stomach churned. She measured the doses with precision, explaining each step. "You will feel drowsy, then your breathing will slow. Do not fight it. Trust me." I swallowed the bitter liquid, praying I would open my eyes again. 15 minutes later, the room began to drift. My body felt heavy, my lips numb. I could hear Marjorie's voice but could not answer. "Perfect," she whispered, checking my wrist. "Your pulse is faint but steady." She dialed 911, her voice breaking as if she were discovering me lifeless. "Please hurry," she cried. My neighbor collapsed. "No pulse, no breathing." When the paramedics arrived, I was barely conscious, aware only of fragments, hands on my chest. Voices murmuring, 63-year-old female, unresponsive, caused likely cardiac arrest. I heard the words I had dreaded and needed in equal measure. "I am sorry, ma'am. She is gone." With those words, Elaine Parker ceased to exist. My body was transported under the watch of strangers, but my spirit clung to the plan. By nightfall, I lay hidden in the basement of Marjorie's home, declared dead to the world, yet more alive than ever with a single purpose: to watch what my family would do next. I watched through hidden cameras while the people I had once trusted walked through my front door with a confidence that felt like theft. They moved like a team only interested in value, not memory. Daniel took the lead, scanning drawers and cupboards for papers. Victoria opened the jewelry box as if inspecting merchandise. Harold and Patricia whispered about buyers and quick sales. They did not cry. There were no hesitant hands over hearts or faltering voices. Instead, there were lists, calculations, and the occasional laugh when they found something they thought worth taking. Patricia flipped through a family album and tossed the photos toward a trash bin. That single act landed in my chest like a slap. At one point, Daniel found the folder with my bank statements and the life insurance policy. His eyes skimmed the numbers and then he looked up at the room with a thin, eager smile. "Is this all?" he asked, as if bargaining. Victoria nodded, already imagining a future without the burden they felt I had been. They spoke casually about cremation and a simple ceremony, citing cost and convenience as if my life could be summarized by expense. Harold suggested a real estate agent and how fast the market would take the house. The conversation felt clinical, the words sharp like scissors cutting through what was left of my trust. Watching them inspect the house like appraisers, my grief turned into something colder. I noticed faces, gestures, the way they divided items in their minds, not their hearts. It was grotesque, and yet it made the proof undeniable. This was not mourning, it was opportunity. I kept watching for hours, compiling every moment, every insult, every chuckle into a catalog of evidence. Marjorie, who had placed hidden cameras during my last anxious nights, texted me updates and snippets. Each clip landed in a folder labeled with the time and the names. In the quiet of that basement, I felt both hollow and focused. I had to be patient. The moment to act would come, and when it did, I wanted the world to see exactly who these people were. The evidence piled higher with each passing day. Recordings of their voices dividing my money, video of them throwing family pictures away, documents showing how quickly they contacted the insurance company. Marjorie and I knew it was time to move from survival to justice. Through one of her old colleagues, we reached a local journalist, Sandra Mitchell from Channel 5 News. She was known for pursuing stories of corruption and abuse. When she sat in Marjorie's kitchen and watched the clips, her jaw tightened. "This is unbelievable," she whispered, then looked me directly in the eyes. "If you are willing to appear on camera, this will change everything." Together with Sandra, we arranged a plan that was part investigation, part theater. The police agreed to be present. The cameras would roll as my family gathered for what Daniel called the official meeting to review my will and divide assets. None of them suspected the woman they believed cremated would walk back through her own front door. The day arrived heavy with anticipation. I wore a red dress I had saved from Daniel's wedding, styled my hair, and stood straighter than I had in years. This was not a disguise. This was me reclaiming the voice they had tried to silence. At 3 p.m, my family sat in my living room, papers spread across the table. Patricia scribbled numbers in a notebook. Victoria smoothed her dress with satisfaction. Daniel cleared his throat, preparing to announce how the assets would be shared. Sandra gave me a nod. "It is time," she said. I pushed open the front door. The creak echoed like thunder. 4 faces turned toward me. For a breath, the room froze. Then Victoria let out a scream. Daniel stumbled back, knocking over his folder. Patricia covered her mouth, whispering ghost. Harold's face drained of color. "Hello, my dear family," I said, stepping forward with the cameras behind me. "I hope I am not interrupting your business meeting." The shock on their faces was captured from every angle. Before they could speak, Sandra introduced herself on live television and explained what viewers were witnessing. Then I played the recordings, Daniel's voice plotting my accident, Patricia mocking my stubbornness, Victoria calling me a burden. The police moved in. Officers read charges aloud: conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud. Handcuffs clicked shut while neighbors and viewers watched. Daniel cried out, "Mom, please, this is not what it looks like." But it was exactly what it looked like. For years I had sacrificed quietly. That day I spoke loudly, not just for myself but for every mother who had ever been treated as expendable. Justice had walked through the door with me. The arrests made headlines across the city before the sun went down. For weeks my story ran on television, radio, and in newspapers. Strangers stopped me in the grocery store to offer a hand squeeze or to whisper, "I am so sorry for what you went through." Some even told me about their own betrayals, as if my story had given them permission to share their pain. The trial moved faster than anyone expected. The recordings, the video, and the insurance paperwork left little room for argument. Daniel tried to paint me as a controlling mother who never let him live his own life. But the jury could hear the difference between a mother's sacrifices and a son's greed. Victoria sobbed on the stand. Harold stared at the floor. Patricia insisted she had only followed her husband's lead. The verdict came back guilty on all counts. Sentences ranged from 10 to 20 years. When it was over, I walked out of the courthouse into the crisp air of Portland with a strange calm. I had lost a son, a brother, and any illusions about family loyalty, but I had kept something more important in my life: my dignity and my freedom to choose what came next. I sold the old house filled with painful memories and bought a smaller place near Marjorie. With part of the money, I set up a scholarship fund for single mothers struggling to send their children to college. It felt right to turn what had almost destroyed me into a light for someone else. In the months that followed, I built a new circle of friends, people who cared for me without calculation. Some were neighbors, some were women who wrote me after hearing my story. We laughed together, shared meals, and reminded one another that real family is chosen in the way people stand by you. Looking back now, I see my journey not only as survival but as rebirth. My son's betrayal broke me, yet it also pushed me to discover a strength I never imagined. If you are listening to this and have ever felt used, betrayed, or unseen, remember this: your worth is not measured by what others can take from you. True family is not written in blood, but in loyalty, kindness, and love freely given. If my story moved you, I invite you to share it, leave a comment about where you are listening from, and subscribe so we can continue walking through these stories together. Your support means more than you know.